If you have high IQ, you're really good at finding post hoc arguments to support your feelings of truthiness. Jonathan Haidt, American social psychologist and author. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Have you heard the news? Apparently, Haitians are eating cats. Yeah. Well, not really true. But the memes were kind of amusing. Before we show you a couple of memes, I just want to make sure that I remind you to subscribe, like, ring the bell, do all those cool things so that you know when Liberty Dad has a new episode out. Most of the time, it is live streamed. However, there are times where it is, I upload a video after the fact. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of these memes because, to be honest with you, they were kind of amusing. So let's see what we got here. Well, we've got this one here with Trump running with two kittens, and apparently it looks like there's Haitians behind him chasing him. Kind of amusing there. Let's see what else we got. We've got this one. Not sure if there are Haitian immigrants in your neighborhood. Look for these signs, and you got some dogs of war, cats of war going on here. Let's see what else. Uh, this is the cat, Trump Vance 2024. Please help the little kittens, little puss in boots there. This one, probably my favorite, riding a giant cat like he was He-Man, except for less muscular and more dressed. So anyway, the memes were kind of funny. I don't get too bent out of shape over memes. I mean, they're just pictures, guys. So we can have a little bit of fun on the internet. We don't have to be too serious. Now, there is a value add in being a little bit serious here. So I lost my link to it. I'll just tell you about it. The story about cats being eaten has nothing to do with Haitians. And you can look it up for yourself. There was a woman in Canton, Ohio, which is like an hour and a half from Springfield or something like that. I'm not sure exactly the distance, but it's a distance from Springfield. And some woman had like killed a cat in front of people and then started eating it. And the police were called. And from what I can tell, she has been a resident for like of that area for many, many years, and it seems that she is not only an American citizen, but like registered to vote, according to some screenshots that I saw on the internet. Now, I don't know the entirety of the truth there, other than to say, as far as we know, she is not a Haitian and she likely is an American citizen. So you can probably rest easy because the Haitians are likely not eating your cats. So just to get that out of the way. But it was kind of funny, but on the other hand, there was some seriousness to it, and we have to distinguish between humor and the truth. Now, let's talk about a little history and some facts, okay? Because I think you'll find some of this interesting. So, Springfield is a city of about 60,000 people, and in the last 4 years or so, you had about, I don't know, 15 to 20,000 migrants, many of them Haitian. So I found an article. One of the things that I love doing, if you're new to the show, I love doing this. I like, if a story breaks today, and maybe there's been some conversation leading up to it in the few months beforehand, I like to go back further and see what were news articles, what were people saying about it, a year ago, 2 years ago, so on and so forth, because that gives me a better perspective of what's happening. So I think in this particular case, it's really going to be helpful. So there's a Dayton Daily News article. And it's the link is in the show notes. It's a very, very lengthy article written in 2023, last year. And so I've selected a number of clips that will help give us some context about Springfield and some of the immigration with Haitians and stuff like that. So it's going to give us a little bit of context. So let me pull up some of these screenshots here, and then we will see what we learn. And why is my let's see here. Why are you not working? It was just working a moment ago. So let me see. Oh, there we go. All right, perfect. Um, so let me do this. There we go. Okay, so make sure I can see it. So title of the story: Haitian immigrants in Springfield face complex immigration system and long delays. Immigrants want to work but have to wait. So this is the title of the article. Again, this was written in 2023. So this is not a new article. It's not like the story broke out. Everybody's talking about Haitian immigrants. Are they eating our cats? What's going on? And then, some news story, says, all right, let's print all this and try to, try to direct them, direct the conversation that's been happening. No, this was written prior to all this breaking out. So it goes on. There's a few clips here of I've got them on the screen so that you can read them and follow along. But again, this is a very lengthy article. I picked out the ones that I think were the most relevant to the conversation today. So it says Haitian immigrant Patrick Joseph said life was hard in Springfield as he waited for more than a year to get the work permit he needed to make money to support himself, his wife, son, and daughter in Haiti. And then it goes on. He lost his cruise ship job during the COVID-19 pandemic and in 2021 flew to the US on a tourist visa that did not include work privileges. Joseph said his family members in Haiti would cry if they had seen how he had to live after arriving in Springfield in August 2021, forced to rely on the generosity of friends for food and to pay rent for him to sleep on an inflatable bed. Going on, Joseph said his struggles were no comparison to the life people in Haiti faced every day, where gang violence, kidnappings, murders, deep poverty, and political chaos are the norm. He's found Springfield to be warm and welcoming place, despite recent protests against Haitian immigrants by people at Springfield City Hall in the wake of a fatal school bus accident involving a Haitian immigrant driver on August 22nd. So keep this, I think this is very important. This guy that they interviewed said, hey, you know what? Springfield is a warm and welcoming place. There's a few people that don't want us, but overall, it's pretty warm and welcoming. Then this article points out that there was an incident that involved a Haitian driver who apparently did not have a license. It caused an accident and it killed a child. So that's part of the history that we've got. A little bit more. Let's continue on. Haitians eligible for temporary protected status. Immigrants here and across the U.S. face long waits for consideration of their applications for work permits and immigration designations such as asylum or temporary protected status. TPS is an immigration designation available to Haitians and foreign nationals from 15 other countries that allows them to live and work in the U.S. for up to 18 months, subject to extension or redesignation by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. There were 610,630 foreign nationals with approved TPS status in the U.S., including 6,005 in Ohio as of March 31st, according to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services data compiled by the U.S. Congressional Research Service. So you had 6,000 people already there, right? 610,000 here in the U.S. All right, so let's see. What else? Congress created TPS in 1990, giving the executive branch authority to designate countries undergoing armed conflict, environmental disaster, or extraordinary and temporary conditions that prevented nationals from returning. It can only be offered to people already in the U.S. who don't have criminal records. So this TPS has been around since 1990. Okay. So that's almost 40 years, coming on close to 40 years. It's been in existence, it's been around. So the idea of immigrants coming over here in large numbers is not really new. Continuing on. TPS was first approved for Haitians in 2010 after a major earthquake devastated the country and has been redesignated or extended several times. Former President Donald Trump attempted to end it for Haiti, but legal challenges stopped that. After President Joe Biden took office in 2021, his administration extended and redesignated TPS for Haiti, which allowed additional Haitians already in the country to become eligible. And let's see, the Haitians were drawn to Springfield by its reputation as a place with lots of jobs, a low cost of living, supportive services, and the presence of other Haitians, according to those interviewed. the Haitian community grew over the last 5 or 6 years to an estimated 5 to 10,000 people. And let's see, I think we got a couple more here. In Springfield, the death of 11-year-old Northwestern student Aiden Clark in the bus accident raised concerns about Haitian immigrants driving without licenses. But critics also allege that the Haitians are here illegally and complain they are taking American jobs, getting taxpayer funded assistance, and draining resources at nonprofits. Some called for their removal. And let's see, I think we got two more here, and then we're gonna kind of talk about what all this means. There was a phenomenal growth in the number of Haitians on the county's public assistance rolls, increasing from 7 cases in 2018 to about 2,705 cases involving 3,300 individuals in September, Martiz said. But Haitian and other immigrants make up a small percentage of the department's total caseload. For example, about 6% of the 49,651 individuals receiving Medicaid in the country are non citizens. And our last article, our last clip here. Haitians represented 15% of total applicants approved for public assistance and 20% of applicants disapproved in August, Martiz said. And 48% of Haitian applicants were not approved for benefits. So this gives you a little bit of background of like what's been going on in Springfield with the Haitian community. Right. So we can see there's a few things that we learned from this. And again, this is an article from last year before it became, talking points all over social media, before we had the cute memes of Trump saving the poor little kitties, right? Before all of that, before we were talking about, all right, are they eating people? Now, in this article, which is much, much longer, there's not a word about any other conflict other than that one incident. Okay. There was that one incident where there was an illegal driver. And I didn't research there. I'm kind of making a presumption here, but apparently he was either involved or caused an accident, and an 11-year-old child died. And they said, hey, this guy wasn't even driving with a license. And so that made people angry, which is normal, right? Like we should be happy that people get angry when an 11-year-old dies. Now, that doesn't mean we're always rational when an 11-year-old dies, but we should always remain angry about it, right? If there's an accident, we should be angry and we should say possibly mean things. That's a good thing. Why? Because that says that we have a certain level of respect that we maintain for children. That is a good thing, but that doesn't mean we should lose our heads. Now, it goes when you're reading this article, you get that sense that this is the only problem, like major problem, right? There's no mention of Haitians eating cats or family pets, any of that stuff. So I know that JD Vance is out there and he's like, well, I've got reports coming in. So what? People call up and say, hey man, I think my dog was eaten because he was here yesterday and now he's not. Okay, well, that's just a report. That doesn't mean anything. We need to operate on what we know. And when we're in the middle of a huge conversation like this, when it gets very popular to talk about, well, then everybody's all like, saying this and saying that. And it's very difficult to parse out the truth. This is why I go back and I say, all right, what were they saying in 2023? What is the history? What's been going on? Because I live in Jacksonville. I don't even live in Ohio. I used to, but I don't now. I haven't lived in Ohio since like 2010, actually, somewhere around there, 2010, 2013, somewhere around there, somewhere in the early 2010s. That's when I think it was 2008. I think I actually moved in 2008. And so I actually moved before the Haitian earthquake. Was it an earthquake? No. Before the natural disaster that they had in Haiti that caused a lot of migrants to come over here in 2010. Okay. So that's a little bit of a history there. So that's what we've got. Now, I want to point out something here. Driving without a license is not really uncommon. Many Americans do it. I don't think it's a very high number, but it is relatively common. So that's not like, I understand that people are frustrated and angry and like, hey, this guy was driving without a license, but he could have had a license and still been involved in an accident, right? Like, so that still could have happened. Now, there is actually a concern about housing, as noted toward the beginning of the article. So let's go back to the article. We'll read more, a couple more of those bits here. So here are two more. This is toward the beginning of the article for the record. When I first came, I was in a 3-bedroom house, said Joseph, 48, who arrived in Springfield in August 2021. We had more than 20 people living in that house. The landlords just rent the bed in the bedroom. A room can sleep like 10 people, and sometimes the house has only one bathroom. It goes on and says Joseph said his struggles were no comparison to the life people in Haiti face every day, where gang violence, kidnappings, murders, deep poverty, and political chaos are the norm. He's found Springfield, again, to be a warm and welcoming place. We've already read this, but I wanted to give you a sense. Like, there were some problems pre-existing to this national conversation that we're having. The problems were housing, jobs, and there was an accident that killed an 11-year-old boy. Those were your major problems prior to this week. That's what we had going on. Now, let's see. And that kind of does match part of JD Vance's claim. So let's take a look. Let's see. So here's what he said. And let's get this up on the screen. All right. So here's what he said. He said, months ago, I raised the issue of Haitian illegal immigrants draining social services and generally causing chaos all over Springfield. A little bit of based on the news that I'm reading, a little bit of exaggeration there. Reports now show that people have had their pets abducted and eaten by people who shouldn't be in this country, whereas our borders are. Okay, that seems to be totally fabricated. So let's hear what he had to say, and we'll get a sense, because we in order to have this conversation, we got to have a little background information. So let's hear what his concerns were back then.
Chairman Brown, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit a letter for the record from the city of Springfield and our state, the southwestern part of our state, which I think highlights a very real example of this particular concern, straight from the horse's mouth itself. And now this letter, I want to quote from it. Springfield has seen a surge in population through immigration that has significantly impacted our ability as a community to produce enough housing opportunities for all. Springfield's Haitian population has increased 15 to 20,000 over the last 4 years in a community of under 60,000 previous residents, putting a significant strain on our resources and ability to provide ample housing for all of our residents. And end quote there. And Mike,
objection. So
thank you. In my conversations with folks in Springfield, it's not just housing. They're trying to build 5,000 new housing units, which is a very Herculean task in a town of about 55,000 people. But it's also hospital services, it's school services, there are a whole host of ways in which this immigration problem, I think, is having very real human consequences.
Okay, so he was bringing up the issue of housing, and housing has been an issue, which makes sense. If you have a sudden influx of people in a short amount of time, and when you're talking like thousands of people over a year or two in a small town of 60,000, then I can imagine that building, having sufficient homes for all of those people is going to be a challenge. And it makes it even more of a challenge if they're coming over and they're not eligible to work. So for instance, Joseph, who this particular story revolves around, he lost his cruise ship job, and then he came over and was looking for work, right? But in the meantime, he's got to stay somewhere while he's looking for work. And then the first work that he gets may or may not even be able to pay enough for him to go out and get a new home. And so then somebody has to build a home, right? So you have all these people come in, somebody has to build homes. Those homes take time. Somebody has to be rest assured that they're going to get their money back, right? So you have this real complication, but it gets even juicier. So let me show you what a friend of mine. Now I'm gonna read his tweet. Jeremy Kaufman is a friend of mine. I like him. He's a very smart individual. I personally think that he hangs on IQ a little bit too much, but whatever. We're going to read what he said, and we're going to get into this IQ business. And then after we get into the IQ business, then we're going to kind of go back and we're going to say, all right, what is a libertarian response? How do we talk about this? How do we manage this? What is the answer, or what is an answer? Maybe not the answer. So let's take a look at his tweet. All right. So here we go. So here it is. So he says Haiti, on average, has an IQ of 67. Let's talk about what that means. With an IQ of 67 or below, the average Haitian, over half the country, would be considered too disabled to be eligible for the death penalty. Someone at this level will struggle to understand the cause and effect of basic things, as well as participate in American society at all. Even filling out forms will be hard. Now, I want to be, because I know that my friend Jeremy is a lightning rod, I want to point out, just knowing him, he's not suggesting that we try to put people to death. What he's pointing out is that this is how serious having an IQ of 67 or below is. It means if you did commit a crime, the punishments are limited. And so he's just making a point here. Okay. Um, at one standard deviation up from 67, we have an IQ of 82. Around 1 in 6 Haitians are intelligent enough to be below average, to be a below average janitor. This is the level of intelligence of poor urban areas in America. At 2 standard deviations, we're at 97, or roughly average intelligence in America. Around 2% of Haitians will be as intelligent as your average high school classmate and could be clerical workers or cooks. At 3 standard deviations, we're at 112. This is approaching the territory where useful, creative, and STEM work can be done. Engineering, for example. This is about 1 out of 1,000 Haitians. At 4 standard deviations, we're at 127. These are people who will come across as bright in your interactions with them, but still wouldn't be gifted. They can perform almost all high status professions. There are only about 440 Haitians in the entire country that are this intelligent out of a population of 11 million. At 5 standard deviations, we're at 142. We're in gifted and potentially genius territory. These are people who can invent, create, and contribute at the highest level. There are approximately 3 of them in the entire country of Haiti. Now, what I'm not familiar with is whether or not all this data is actually true. Like how many people scored, what did they score? I did look up and it looks like somewhere there about 67 is about correct on the average. Okay. But I didn't look at any of the data in full. So I can't tell you like, are the clusters of IQ closely related or do we have some high swings? It suggests, but reading through Jeremy's tweet, that they're clustered closely together. So your average is, more reliable in this particular sense. But we're going to go with it. Okay. We're going to assume that all of that was true. And it gets even a little bit spicier from there because here's what End Wokeness, the account End Wokeness, they posted. They posted something similar, but a little bit more interesting. So where did it go here? There you are. And here we go. So this is from the account End Wokeness. Haiti average IQ 67, USA average IQ 100, Haiti illiteracy rate 40%, USA literacy rate 18%, Haiti homicides 60.9 per 100K, USA homicides 6.2 per 100K, Haiti annual income 1,740 US dollars versus USA annual income 63,795 US dollars. And then they ask, what could possibly go wrong with the importation of 5% of the entire Haitian population? So the gist here is that between IQ, literacy, homicide, and income, the Haitian people are unfit to be here. However, Haitian people are already here. That's what so what we can do is we can say, what has been the case since they've been here? This is why I like to go back. Because we can look at it right now. We can say, well, based on this information right here, sounds like we don't want any Haitians. But then again, what is the picture that we get when we look a little bit back in history? Do we see that in Springfield or other places in Ohio where Haitians are moving to, do we see their literacy rates as low? Now, the migrants who moved over here probably are not going to have, they're probably not going to go from 40%, from falling within that 40% rate to being more literate, right? They're not going to go from illiterate to literate all of a sudden. Not necessarily. They might, but it's not necessarily, right? Their income, that's maybe their income might go up if they can get a job. That depends, right? Now, their income would likely go up. So I don't think that income matters whatsoever. Homicides are very interesting. I didn't see any reports of homicides. Now, how did I determine that? What I did, as I said, I literally typed into Google, Haitian, Ohio. That's what I did. And I went back and I said, all right, now let's filter this out. And I start at 2000 and I said, 1/1/2000 all the way to, I think I did like 12/31/2016. And then I did another block and another block just because I wanted to see. And I wasn't seeing articles. Now, that's not to say there wasn't any violent crimes committed by Haitians. What that's saying is that there weren't enough, at least, to hit the radar and become popular news stories. That's what it's telling us. There's possible, like, if you dig deep enough, with thousands of people coming over, it's likely that one of them has committed a crime. But the question is, are the crimes being committed at the same rate as we see in Haiti? One of the interesting things that my wife loves to tell me, she loves to correct me, as wives do. My wife is from Indonesia, and she was born and raised in Indonesia, came over here, got her engineering job. I'm sorry, not job, but she got a degree in engineering and in business, double masters. And then she went on to get some work, and she's been here ever since. And so I point out, I'm like, well, immigrants tend to have higher incomes, higher education levels over here in the United States. And she points out, she says, well, those are the immigrants that are coming over here. She said, there are plenty, as she would say, in any country that are stupid, right? Like they're not very smart. They don't care about education. Maybe they are violent, right? And so now the question that we have to ask ourselves, with the Haitians that are already here, do those Haitians fit the profile of the Haitians in Haiti? Are they the same? Now, in this list here that we're looking at, let's see if I can point to it. Point there. There you go. In this list here, and I can't get all of my finger won't go all the way up. IQ is not going to likely change, not at least for those that have just come here. And as we're going to see in just a moment, it's probably going to change for their descendants, their offspring. Like when they have children, that's going to change. We're going to see about that in just a minute. Their literacy rate, that's subjective. It might go up, it might not. It depends on when they come over here, what line of work they get, and how much effort they put into becoming literate. But that could change, right? The IQ is not going to change. Literacy rate could change. And again, we don't know the ones that come over here. Are they in the 40% or are they in the 60%? I think I've been saying it wrong. The literacy rate is 40%. So 60% are illiterate. So are they part of the 60% who are illiterate, or are they part of the 40% who are literate on some level? Right? We don't know that. So that information, not very useful. Homicides. Are they part of the people are they part of those Haitians who commit homicide? If they're not, then, which it seems like it based on history, based on our news history, it seems like they're not part of that, the crowd of people who are willing to commit homicide. Sounds like we've got ones that came over here and weren't looking to be violent. All right. Annual income. Well, the annual income is low because Haiti is a poor country. Of course, it's going to be low. So that's not a relevant statistic at all. So most of this information is not relevant. But let's talk about IQ, because that seems to be all of the rage today. All right, let's see here. And we've got a comment here. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Mr. Geller says IQ has been widely discredited as a comprehensive measure of intelligence and tied to eugenics. Can't wait to hear you talk about it. Well, hopefully I deliver. We'll see. Let's see. Let's see here. Tommy says he's probably assuming it's a bell curve. And so maybe. I assume. I don't know exactly, but I'm just going to try to paint a picture here. And I want to paint a very useful picture. So let's talk about IQ. So one of my favorite authors, Thomas Sowell, has written a lot about, seems like everything. I mean, he's written like 30 or 40 books. The man is like 93 years old. And I think like 2 years ago, he's published another book. I mean, the man is a powerhouse when it comes to intellect. It's insane. And he has done so much research on so many topics, and he really, really just can deliver. And like, it doesn't matter what you read from Soul, you walk away more intelligent or more knowledgeable, at least, than you were before you read him. Right? Like, if I read something new today, I'm going to be more knowledgeable. So let's see what he had to say, and because I think this is very interesting. All right, so
Is there a
boom.
relationship between, or an important relationship between race and mental capacity?
If you well, capacity is if you mean by capacity potential, then who knows? Because you can't measure potential currently, and I suspect for the next 100 years or so probably. What you can recognize and measure is capacity, developed capabilities. You can measure those with SATs and stuff like that, but potential you cannot.
So when it comes to race, how does that play into the measurements that we have today?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Is there a correlation between IQ, that what we have and what we're able to measure today, and race?
Oh, sure. I mean, and there's always been among all sorts of groups around the world. I mean, people in the Hebrides Islands off Scotland have the same IQs as blacks in the United States, and probably for similar reasons, because they're an isolated culture. And
Wait. What did you just say? He said he compared two IQs of two different groups of people, two different parts of the planet, and said it had something to do with isolation. Keep that in mind.
Isolated cultures tend not to have the same achievements as people who are in cultures that have a sort of larger cultural universe to draw upon. So the data are good for measuring what is likely to happen with a given person at a given time under given circumstances. But as for the ultimate potential at the time, at the moment of conception, no one has come close to anything like that.
Okay, so we get a little sense, and I don't want to put too many words into Dr. Soul's mouth. We get a sense that IQ is a nice measurement, but it has some limitations. And so if we're looking at a 67 IQ, then we can reasonably, as Jeremy pointed out, we can reasonably identify and say, here is some of the work that you will be able to accomplish. Okay. Like, if you have a 67 IQ, you're probably not writing computer programs, right? Like, that's pretty much a given. You're not going to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. That's pretty much a given. Okay. So now we have to look at, and we have to be careful though, because we can't just say, well, okay, well, you have a 67 IQ, so therefore you can't do anything, because there's more to the story to IQ than just what can you do in this moment in time. So enter a man named Glenn Lowry. I found this from Lex Friedman's podcast. He makes a very interesting argument here. And let's see, where did my videos go here? All right, so this one's a little bit longer. This is about 3 minutes. We're going to watch this, and we're going to get a sense for, let's just watch.
I could start by questioning the very foundation of the argument for racial differences in cognitive ability by saying that your measure of cognitive ability is flawed. I could go to a higher level. I could say what we're really interested in is social outcomes, and the question of what factors influence social outcomes extends well beyond mental ability to many other things. So here's
okay. So let's pause it right there. So the real question here is kind of like, what do we do with this information? But even more than that, the real question is, okay, what are they going to do when they get here? That's really what we care about. Because to be honest with you, most people don't care about how high somebody's IQ is or how low it is. It's not relevant to them. What they really care about is, are you going to be a good neighbor? Are you going to be, on government assistance? Are you going to be somebody that I can count on to, keep like my neighbors? I don't care the IQ of any of my neighbors, whether they're white or black. What I care about is, are they going to keep their house in order so that my house doesn't devalue in its property value? Right. That's what I care about. Are they going to be good neighbors? Like maybe can I go borrow a cup of sugar from them one day? All right, maybe, or are they going to invite me over to their wine party? Right? Like these are the things that we actually care about. We don't really care about whether they have a high IQ. I don't really care about what their income level is. Why? Because I just assume that whatever their income level is sufficient to meet the bills that they have taken on. That's all I care about. Like you pay your bills. That's it. Your income is not relevant to me. So a lot of these things aren't really. I am concerned. Like, hey, not concerned, but I do care if they're a violent criminal. I don't want a violent criminal living next to me, right? So those are the kind of things that we actually care about. Basically, we can boil it all down and say what we really care about is: are you going to be a productive member of this society? That's what we care about. Now we're still bothered with this question of 67 IQ because if you can't do very many things, then maybe you are going to be more of a burden, right? That's kind of the implication that we have here. So we still have to address that. But I think so far, we've kind of pointed out that many of these other things, they don't matter. They're nice talking points to scare people, but they don't really matter. So let's continue listening to Mr. Lowry here.
An example, visual acuity. How well do you see? You're not wearing glasses. I am. Visual acuity varies between human beings. Some people see better than other people do. Visual acuity can be measured. I can put you at the chart and can you identify and read that bottom line in small print or not? So we can measure visual acuity, and it varies between human beings. Visual acuity is partly genetic. I think that's undoubtedly true. We inherit genes that influence whether or not we are nearsighted or farsighted or astigmatic or whatever. So visual acuity differs between people and can be measured and is under genetic control. On the other hand, corrective lenses allow for us to level the playing field between people who are differently endowed in terms of visual acuity. Likewise, social outcomes are what we're really interested in: employment, earnings, whether or not they're law-abiding, how do they conduct themselves and their families and so forth amongst individuals. Yes, social outcomes are influenced by so-called cognitive ability, but they're influenced by many other things as well. If there are interventions that can be undertaken in society that level the playing field between people who have different natural endowments of cognitive ability, the fact that people or groups differ in cognitive ability becomes less significant. Just like it's less significant that people differ with respect to how well they see when corrective lenses allow for the leveling of that playing field.
Okay. That's a very interesting clip and very interesting insight. So basically he's like, look, maybe you're not very smart, but maybe there are things that can operate, interventions, as he says it, that can assist in making sure that the social outcome is favorable. Basically meaning you're not a criminal and you're somebody that's productive in our society. Now, I want to tell you something from a more personal standpoint. I used to work at I worked at a fastener distribution company, and I was visiting one of our clients, and there was a particular room. They called it was it the packing room? It was something like that. No, it was something else. But basically what they did was they would take small little baggies. And because I was working with I was working in the fastener industry. So we're talking about nuts, bolts, screws, anything that fastens two things together. Right. So there was a particular room where the kitting room, that's what it was. They would make kits. And so when you buy, like, say, a new desk or something, and you get that bag and it's got a whole bunch of screws, and bolts and nuts or whatever, it's kind of all bagged up. That's what was going on in this particular room. So you would have people bring in, large boxes of like nuts and bolts and screws. And then you would have people in there that would like count out like 5 nuts and bolts or something like that per baggie for whatever purpose that they were making. Well, in this particular room, they had a lot of developmentally challenged people that were working there because apparently they identified that this was a particularly good job for people that did not have, if you will, high IQs. They were developmentally challenged. So this idea that, oh, you have 67 IQ, that means there's nothing that you can contribute to society. Well, the nicest way to say it is that's a retarded idea. And maybe it's not nice, but it's true because I have personally seen that there are jobs that people with lower IQs can accomplish. So we have those. But the story gets a little bit, the story is not over yet. So back to Thomas Sowell. And back to Thomas Sowell, he wrote this paper, and let's see, what's the title of this paper? And I'm going to put it up on the screen. Well, it's called Race, Culture, and Equality. And I love this paper because it really puts a lot of things in perspective. And I want to answer a question here really quickly. Somebody says, isn't that called socialism, intervention that offsets people outcome to intellectual capability? Yes and no. The reason, and thank you, Not So Extreme Gamers, for that question. Yes and no. So if we follow Lowry's example, he says I have these glasses, which basically make, and I have glasses. Like so if you're in the audience and you do not wear corrective lenses and you do not wear contacts, your vision is 20/20. You and I are at the same level because of this intervention. However, I paid for it. Okay. I mean, technically I paid for it partially in my insurance, but the gist being it wasn't given to me. Right. So I'm not suggesting that we give people anything. What I am suggesting is that in the same way that glasses level the playing field, if you will, between somebody who has vision issues and somebody who does not, there are ways that we can level. And when I say we, I don't mean we socially in a more socialist manner. I just mean things that can occur in our society. They can also level the playing field. For example, we could have a company that says, hey, here is a job that doesn't take a lot of cognitive ability. Rather than putting people that have, like, say, an 100 IQ into this position, why don't we give an opportunity to people that have developmental issues? This will be a good job for them. They can earn an income and they can be a productive member of society, and it gives them something to do. Right. And all of my experience in that room, the kidding room, right. And I don't want to make it sound like they shoved him in this back corner. It was actually quite a big room, and they had racks and they had all kind of material in there. So it was like a huge room, probably bigger than a house, very huge room. And you just had like these tables, and then you had all the racks, to the side where the material could be. And then they would set it up so that people could basically make bag kits of fasteners. So that's what was happening. So what I'm suggesting is that the story is insufficient to just say 67 IQ, you're not welcome here because there's nothing for you. What I am saying is that I think there are opportunities, and the best thing that we can do is get out of the way and let those opportunities bubble up. That's it. Right. So we'll touch upon that more in just a moment, but I wanted to answer that question very, very quickly. Let's go take a look at Thomas Sowell's article here that I'm going to put up on the screen, and we're going to read some snippets from it. It's a long article. I will post a link in the show notes so that you can go and read it in its fullness, because I read it over again this morning. I am not going to be able to do it justice with a few clips, but I think we'll be able to do enough to make the point here on the show. So let me go back and let's pull this up. So here we are. Here's his article, Race, Culture, and Equality by Thomas Sowell. I don't recall when he wrote this. And I think actually this might have been a speech. So it starts off, says, During the 15 years that I spent researching and writing my recently completed trilogy on racial and cultural issues, I was struck again and again with how common huge disparities in income and wealth have been for centuries in countries around the world, and yet how each country regards its own particular disparities as unusual, if not unique. Some of these disparities have been among racial or ethnic groups, some among nations, and some among regions, continents, or whole civilizations. We'll scroll down here to my next highlighted part. Educational differences are just one source of economic disparities. Even at the level of craft skills, groups have differed enormously as they have in urbanization. During the Middle Ages, and in some places long beyond, most of the population of the cities in Slavic Eastern Europe were not Slavs. Germans, Jews, and other non Slavic peoples were the majority populations in these cities for centuries, while the Slavs were predominantly peasants in the surrounding countrysides. Groups also differ demographically. It is not uncommon to find some groups with median ages a decade younger than median ages of other groups, and differences of 2 decades are not unknown. During the era of the Soviet Union, for example, Central Asians had far more children than Russians or the peoples of the Baltic republics, and so had much younger median ages. At one time, the median age of Jews in the United States was 20 years older than the median age of Puerto Ricans. If Jews and Puerto Ricans have been absolutely identical in every other respect, including their cultures and histories, they would still not have been equally represented in jobs requiring long years of experience, or in retirement homes, or in activities associated with youth, such as sports or crime. So what Sol is saying, and he said this many times in other articles and books that he's written, he's pointed out that there are a variety of differences that contribute to the difference in outcomes of different people. Ages, your location, education, and he even narrows it down and he says, like, even within families, you might have a brother and a sister, and the brother goes on to do very well while the sister maybe either doesn't do well, becomes a crackhead, or just lives, your typical American life, and the brother is maybe, becomes a CEO of a hotshot Wall Streeter or something like that, right? And he points out that they could have went to the same school, they had the same parents, and they had uh, the same treatment at home, relatively similar experiences. And at the end of the day, they still vastly differ. But then he goes on and he says those differences, there's just any number of reasons why the outcomes are different. But all we care about are a simple outcome. If you come to the United States, are you going to be a productive member of our society? That's really what most Americans care about. So that's what we need to focus on. Nothing so intractably conflicts with our desires for equality as geography. The physical settings in which races, nations, and civilizations have evolved have had major impacts on the cultures developed within those settings. Those settings vary enormously, as do their cultural consequences. Too often, the influence of geography on wealth is thought of narrowly in terms of natural resources that directly translate into wealth, such as oil in the Middle East or gold in South Africa. But important as such differences in natural wealth are, geography influences even more profound cultural differences among the people themselves. Where geography isolates people, whether in mountain valleys or on small islands scattered across the vast sea, the cultural exposures of those people to the outside world are very limited, and so typically is their technological advancement. While the rest of the world exchanges goods, knowledge, and innovations from a vast cultural universe, isolated peoples have been largely limited to what they alone have been able to develop. Does that sound like a country that we might be talking about? Like, I don't know, Haiti. Does Haiti go out and interface with the rest of the world such that they can draw upon the knowledge of the rest of the world? No, they don't. They also had a major disaster in 2010 that made it even worse. But as Thomas Sowell pointed out previously, I think was it in this one or? Okay. But he points out, it might be in this article, and I just haven't got to it yet. But he points out that Haitians have been basically independent for, like, I think he said 2 generations or 2 decades, but a lot longer. Well, it couldn't have been 2 decades. It might have had to have been 2 generations. Um, but they've basically had more freedom than Black people here in America. Yet they're actually poorer. So let's continue on. Let's see. We're going to skip down here. When the British first crossed the Atlantic and confronted the Iroquois on the eastern seaboard of what is today the United States, they were able to steer across the ocean in the first place because they used rudders invented in China. They could navigate on the open seas with the help of trigonometry invented in Egypt. Their calculations were done with numbers invented in India, and their general knowledge was preserved in letters invented by the Romans. But the Iroquois could not draw upon the knowledge of the Aztecs or the Incas, whose very existence they had no way of knowing. The clash was not between the culture created by the British versus the culture created by the Iroquois. It was a clash between cultural developments drawn from vast region of the world versus cultural developments from a much more circumscribed area. The cultural opportunities were unequal and the outcomes were unequal. Geography has never been egalitarian. All right, continuing on. And hopefully you're starting to see the picture that I'm painting here. Perhaps the strongest case against the predominance of discrimination as an explanation, this is the part I was talking about, explanation of economic disparities would be a comparison of blacks in Haiti with blacks in the United States. Since Haiti became independent, that's the word I was looking for, became independent 2 centuries ago, Haitian blacks should be the most prosperous blacks in the hemisphere, and American blacks the poorest, if discrimination is the overwhelming factor. But in fact, the direct opposite is the case. It is Haitians who are the poorest and American blacks who are the most prosperous in the hemisphere and in the world in terms of black folk, right? So what he's saying here, just to kind of tie this up and kind of put it together, he's saying that geography plays a huge role because it influences the amount of interfacing that a population or a culture has with other cultures. And why is that? Because no one culture comes up with everything. It's like if I'm with a friend and we're trying to put together a new software program, I will not come up with all of the ideas of how it should work. I will not come up with all the clever ways to write the code. My friend will contribute to some of that, and that will contribute to my knowledge. And so while we both work on this program together, I am benefiting from the knowledge and experience that he has. In the same way, the British benefited from the knowledge and ideas that other cultures had. That's why they were able to do things. And when you see a country or a civilization that appears to be what we would call backwards, you always see that they don't have that level of interfacing. They are not out absorbing all this other information. And because of that, they are going to be behind. Why? Because they can't come up with all the knowledge. Neither could we. We had to acquire the knowledge from other peoples and put it all together. Gets more interesting. There are other groups to whom none of these factors apply and who still have had test scores as great as test score differences as great as those between black and white children in the Jim Crow South. Japanese and Mexican immigrants began arriving in California at about the same time and initially worked in very similar occupations as agricultural laborers. Yet a study of a school district in which their children attended the same schools and sat side by side in the same classrooms found IQ differences as great as those between blacks and whites attending schools on opposite sides of town in the Jim Crow South. International studies have found different groups of illiterates, people with no educational differences because they had no education, with mental test differences larger than those between blacks and whites. Let's see here. What I don't have this highlighted, but what is the reason? There may not be any such thing as the reason. There are so many cultural, social, economic, and other factors interacting that there was never any reason to suspect equal results in the first place. That is why plausible simplicities must be subject to factual scrutiny. So I think that might be everything that I had. No, history, geography, and cultures are influences, but they are not predestination. Not only individuals, but whole peoples have moved from backwaters of the world to the forefront of civilization. The late Italian author Luigi Barzini asked of Britain, how in the first place did a peripheral island rise from primitive squalor to world domination? The story of Japan's rise from a backward country in the mid-19th century to one of today's leading economic powers has been at least equally as dramatic. Scotland was for centuries known for its illiteracy, poverty, and lack of elementary cleanliness. Yet, from the mid-18th to the mid-19th century, most of the leading intellectual pioneers of Britain were Scots, and Scots also became prominent in business, banking, medicine, and engineering, not only in Britain, but around the world. Japan's economic rise from a stage of technological backwardness that was demonstrated when Commodore Perry presented them with the gift of a train. Here was their reaction. At first, the Japanese watched the train fearfully from a distance, and when the engine began to move, they uttered cries of astonishment and drew in their breath. Before long, they were inspecting it closely, stroking it, and riding on it, and they kept this up throughout the day. A century later, the Japanese bullet train would be one of the technological wonders of the world, surpassing anything available in the United States. And I believe that's everything that I have highlighted in this particular article. So I suggest that you look up this article and you read it. It is a very phenomenal article, lots of information, much more than what I'm divulging here. So let's bring this all together. Let's talk about this. Ultimately, IQ is a current moment in time. Now, if you're an adult and your IQ is 67, it's probably not going to get much better. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be the case for your children. And it doesn't mean that you cannot produce and be productive member of society. I want to point out a few things. Number one, most CEOs do not have PhDs. That doesn't make them not smart. They just don't have PhDs. Okay. And maybe they're not high IQ. I don't really know. It does take a different type of intelligence to be a CEO of a major company. I believe that most inmates, the rough IQ for inmates in the United States is somewhere in the 80-90 range. Okay, so a little bit lower than our average here in the U.S. of about 100, but higher than Haiti's average. So the fact that there's 67 IQ average doesn't necessarily say anything about violence, because we have people here in the US who are in the 80s and the 90s and they commit violence. Then if you look at, there have been plenty of people, plenty meaning like not like hundreds of thousands per se, but plenty of cases of people who were very, very smart who did very, very terrible things. And another point to make, many of the worst world leaders, Stalin, Hitler, all these people, many of those people had an army of intellectuals backing them up, supporting every move that they made. So intellect, so the idea that IQ necessarily correlates with violence is just not true. Now, you might be able to go and say, like, look, the majority of people within this particular range of IQ, tend not to be violent. And that may be true. But is that really about IQ, or is it about all the other things that play a role in whether or not they're a productive member of society? So let's think about what it takes to be a productive member globally. To be a productive member globally, and I mean at an average or somewhere like in the middle. We're not talking about like high productive necessarily. We're just, you just have to develop things and interface with other people. And the things that you develop will be used by other people. Thus, the British, because they were interfacing with so many different countries, they were able to put together all these different things, right? They were able to use trigonometry, as Dr. Soul says. They were able to use rudders for their ships, from China. The trigonometry that came from, what do you say, Egypt. The numbers came from India. The writing came from the Romans, right? So they drew upon all this knowledge to become the powerhouse that they were, or if you will, to be more simple, a productive member of the global, a productive member globally. And I'm excluding, their conquest and all that. I'm just saying, like, in terms of going out and saying, like, okay, we are meeting with this group of people. We're going to adopt some of their ideas. They're going to adopt some of our ideas. That's what I mean when I say productive member, just the exchange of ideas. That's what we're talking about. So the exchange of ideas occurs when you interface, and that makes you smarter effectively. That's the reason why you have higher IQs, right? Like, well, let me rephrase that. That is not the reason. That is a contributing factor. Because if you don't have education, if you don't have access to all this stuff, you might actually have the capacity for a higher IQ, as Dr. Soul pointed out in the very beginning. But if it's not worked upon, if it's not engaged, then nobody will ever see it. So the reality is that while Haiti might have an average of 67 IQ, the real question is, if we care about IQ, what is the capability? Well, we don't know what their capability is, but we do know that many other cultures went from backwards, poverty ridden and all these problems, but basically useless societies, if we want to think of it that way. We know that many other societies went from backwards to technologically advanced. I mean, the Japanese, like I used to joke when I was like a teenager that the Japanese were trying to make everything micro machines. Right. It just felt like every time I would see something, Japanese would be like, yeah, we made it smaller. Right. Like it was just crazy. I was like, all right, you guys need to stop this. Right. But once upon a time, they were just blown away by the idea of a train. The train, like they were flipped. It was documented that they were stroking the train. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I guess they were just like petting it like it was a dog. I don't know. But the point being, they were not always the technological powerhouse that we see today. And many cultures were not. Scotland, China. China has an interesting, like at one point in time, they were the top culture and then they dropped down below, right? Like, so, and so we see this reality that's on the ground, which is that a number, an IQ number, is not the end all be all because it does not tell you what can be. The other interesting thing that I want to point out is that if we know that Haitians coming over here are apparently not committing crimes, at least not at the rate that Haitians over in Haiti are, then that means that there is a possibility, a strong possibility, that there are plenty of people who could come over here and contribute to our society. So then the question becomes, what does it take? So this is where I think the libertarian answer plays a really huge role. Libertarianism basically is like, a lot of people will say like, well, you libertarians, you don't want any laws. You just want the market and you want to step over bodies. And they'll make all these crazy claims. But the truth of the matter is, what we really say is libertarianism is about the individual. You own yourself and you own the things that you yourself produce. So if I go out in the garden, if I go out in my yard and I create a garden and I till it and I put all the work into it and I grow a bunch of vegetables, then all those vegetables are now my property because they came from my hand. They came from my body. They came from me. I'm the one that produced them. So therefore, I have the same level of control over those as I do my own body. So what that really means is that I should be able to determine when and how I sell them. And you, if you're a viewer or a listener, if you choose that you want to exchange with me, you can choose if you want to buy them or exchange in some way. Maybe you want to barter. And nobody else should be involved in that transaction. The government shouldn't say, well, we haven't inspected DL's garden, so therefore he can't sell you these. The only thing for libertarians is that, one, there is a mechanism for redress. So if I sell you bad vegetables and you get sick and I knew they were bad vegetables, right, then you should be able to come after me and say, hey, you didn't tell me that these vegetables were bad. You told me they were actually really good. And maybe I even lied and said I had them tested and they show no signs of any kind of disease or any kind of, like anything that would cause you to be sick. Right. And so if I lied to you, well, then that's fraud. So now you have a claim against me. That's the world that libertarians want. Libertarians want a world where I can decide what skills I have and that can produce, and then I can provide my fellow man. Right. Dr. Walter Williams used to say, what is a dollar? And he said, it's a certificate that says that I have contributed to my fellow man. Why is that? Because if I come work for you, let's say you have the garden and you say, man, my garden's growing big, lots of juicy vegetables, but I don't have the time anymore to maintain it. So I'm going to hire DL. So I come over and I work, let's say I work 2 hours a day on your garden, right? It's a big, nice big garden. I come in, I work 2 hours a day, I do the job, and then you pay me some money. That money is a certificate that I have contributed to, to the world around me. It's a certificate effectively that says I benefited my fellow man, because my fellow man said, all right, you did some work for me. Here's your dollar or your $10 or what have you, right? So when we look at it on those terms, then the reality is, and we understand that interaction with the world around us makes us better, then I think we have the case that it's not a problem if Haitians come over here, so long as they're not bringing their violence, so long as we're not necessarily giving them a bunch of a bunch of handouts. This is why I favor the Ellis Island model. Because if we look back in Ellis Island, there wasn't really much for entitlements and all these handouts for people. You didn't have that, and you had stories at that time of people who would come over, and like I heard them, like so many of them. My grandpa came over here with $20 in his pocket. Okay, and now he owns a meat shop. Well, that's how did that happen, right? And so I think there's a value add in having immigrants come over here. Now, do we want to be selective? Maybe. I think that we should be selective on 2 counts, just 2. Number 1, have you committed any violent crimes? If you've committed a violent crime in your own country, I don't want you, right? And I mean a violent crime. You rape, murder, you stab somebody, you beat somebody up, those kind of violent crimes. The other thing is if you have a communicable disease, a serious one, like if you have like a cough because you got, like the flu, that's not a big deal. But if you got something serious like Ebola or something like that, then yeah, we should probably say, no, you can't come over here because we don't want to spread this disease. And I will make one exception on that. And the exception is like we do have great medical centers. So maybe a medical center has said, nope, we're going to take responsibility for this guy who has Ebola. We think we have a novel treatment and this could be a game changer in medical advancements. So we're going to take care of him. We will make sure that this sickness does not spread. In that case, I'm okay with it. But those are my 2 criteria for whether or not you should be able to come over. And then from there, we don't give you any handouts. Like you're on your own, basically. And we free up your opportunities to be able to do things to get that certificate, to be able to get money, to get paid. So if you come over here and like agriculture is a big deal, that's one of the big that's one of the big employment opportunities that of the few that they do have in Haiti. Agriculture is a big one. So if somebody comes over here and they get a plot of land, or maybe they want to work on my land, I'm okay with this, right? And now people will say, well, what if they don't have? What if they have to live 10 to a house? Like what was his name? Can't remember his name now. But the other gentleman, what if they have to live 10 to a house? Well, that's still better than what they had. That's better than what they had. And so they may be comfortable with that. Like he said, where's, I'm going to go back to that because I think it bears repeating. Let's see here. Let's go back. Let's show this here. All right. So where is it? Let me get it back up on the screen here so that I can see it. Joseph, that's his name. He said his struggles were no comparison to the life people in Haiti face every day, where gang violence, kidnappings, murders, deep poverty, and political chaos are the norm. And he found Springfield to be a warm and welcoming place, despite recent protests. So even he's looking at it and he's like, look, this is a great place. This is utopia for me compared to what I had. And now he's looking to, or he was looking to get a job, to be employed. He was looking to produce. And there's somewhere in the article, I don't know if I had it here. Let me see. No, let's take a look here. Yeah, here it is, right here. Said life was hard in Springfield as he waited for more than a year to get the work permit he needed to make money to support himself and his wife, son, and daughter in Haiti. So he waited an entire year living in undesirable conditions for Americans, but better than Haitians, so that he could support his family. Are you going to tell me that the kind of person that we want in America is not the kind of person that would spend an entire year just trying to get a permit to work so that they could support their family? That's not the kind of person we want, regardless of their IQ. I don't know what Joseph's IQ is. Seems like it's more than 67. But let's just say it was 82. I just made up a number. It's 82. He can be a janitor. Okay. Well, we need janitors. We need somebody to clean the school buildings. Those are needed jobs. And we don't want somebody who might have a lower IQ who's willing to wait a year to get that job. Let me ask you something, Americans. Would you wait a year to get a job as a janitor? No, you would not. You would complain and throw a fit about the lack of jobs, or you would find something else. And I know Americans who have been like, I'll never work at McDonald's. I'll never work here. But then you get some of these immigrants that come over here and they're willing to work, right? Now, is there a competition for jobs? Well, there's always a competition for jobs. Have you, like, how many times you have went to an interview and you were the only one versus how many times you went to an interview and you knew there were other people? The majority of the time, there were other people. You assume that they were all American-born citizens, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, you don't really know that. You don't necessarily know who they are. But you know that there were people competing for those jobs. And how do we get more jobs? Well, it's not through government per se. It would be if they just started deregulating things. But many of the regulations limit the jobs that are available. So let me talk about just one, and then we're going to close it up here. Take, sorry, I'm clicking some buttons here. So take minimum wage. I don't remember exactly what minimum wage. I think the federal minimum wage is like $7.50 or something like that. But let's just say it's like $7.50. And that's the minimum wage. Well, if I have a certain budget, I can only hire so many people for minimum wage. However, if I have that same budget and there's no minimum wage, guess what I can do? I might be able to hire a couple people more. I can hire somebody for maybe $6 an hour who comes from Haiti, who was willing to wait an entire year to maybe be a janitor or whatever it is that he was trying to do. He waited an entire year to get a job, or we could reduce some of the regulations that would allow me to hire him. Now, when he comes over, because we know some of the data over in Haiti, we know that there's a high degree of illiteracy. We know that there's a high degree of low IQ. We know there's a high degree of low work skills. That means they're going to be very, very limited. So as long as the minimum wage is higher, many of those immigrants aren't going to be eligible for those jobs. Because if I have to pay $7.50 an hour, $10 an hour, or whatever the amount is, I'm going to be looking to maximize the amount of work that I'm getting for that pay. However, if I can pay less, I might be willing to take a chance and say, you know what, let me hire this person who's got a 75 IQ, who doesn't have very many work skills, who just got here from another country, and I'll give them an opportunity. They don't have to wait a whole year now in order to get a job. They can get a job right away. It's not making a great pay. They might have to live in undesirable circumstances, but still, again, better than where they came from. If they're not committing a violent crime and they're making sure that they're putting in the effort to have a job so that they can make money, so that they can support their family, then they are by virtue a productive member of this society. And along the way, they're getting skills that they might not have otherwise achieved or acquired while they were in Haiti. So you come and you work for me and you start out, let's just say that you start out as a janitor. Right? I hire a janitor for my business, and the janitor is a Haitian, and I hired him for $5 an hour. Right? That's the pay that I have agreed that I will pay him. That's the pay that he has agreed to accept for that work, which, by the way, as a libertarian, this fits right in. Why? Because as I said earlier, you own your body. You get to make that choice. I own my body. Therefore, I own my business that I put all the hard work in. Therefore, I own the money that's associated with it. Therefore, I own how it gets dispersed. And I should be able to decide how much I pay people. Equally, on the other side of that equation, this Haitian immigrant, we'll call him Joseph. Let's say it's Joseph coming to me. He owns his own body. He decided that he was going to travel to America because he decides what he wants to do with his body. Then he decides that he's willing to live in a building that has 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms with 10 other Haitians because they have no money and they can't afford anything better. Then he decides that he could wait for a year for that $8 an hour job, that $9 or $10 an hour job that may or may not come, or he can take the $5 an hour job that I'm offering him. Now he's making a little bit of money. And he also happens to be doing what? He is building his work experience, which goes toward future employment. So when an employer says, "What have you been doing for the last year?" He can say, "I've been working as a janitor for DL." And he might also say, "While I was working for a janitor, I was studying. And here's the evidence to show that I've been studying. And so I've been acquiring more skills on the side." So now he is in a better place than he was when he first stepped foot. All because, as libertarians believe, you own yourself. Nothing whatsoever to do with IQ. The only thing that we care about, at least in my vision here, the only thing that's cared about is, were you a productive member of society, right? And that boils down to, did you take handouts, which would take money from other people, and did you produce something, anything? That is the answer to all of this. The answer is freedom. It's like a one-word answer. Freedom is the answer. Freedom for me to decide what I want to do with my resources. Freedom for Joseph, the Haitian immigrant, to decide what he wants to do with his labor and his body. And if he chooses that he would like to live in an apartment with 10 other guys, right? That's not desirable. I wouldn't want to live that way. But if I was traveling to another country for a better opportunity and I'm going there and it's a choice between living in an apartment or a house with 10 other guys versus living in, squalor, worrying about whether or not somebody's going to murder me, I think that's a hands down decision. America is the land of opportunity for a reason. However, when you start adding regulation, then it stops being the land of opportunity. And when you have more and more regulation and you're still allowing people to come over here, the problem is that you have regulated their opportunities away from them. You have done them a disservice. But it wasn't once like that. We didn't always have that. Once upon a time, as we've heard from the stories of grandfathers, people came over here on a boat with $20 in their pocket, slept in the back room of a donut shop, saved up all of their money, eventually was able to buy their own meat shop or whatever, or simply take their skills and move on somewhere else. The truth of the matter is, our problem isn't immigration. Our problem is regulation. And that's what the conversation needs to be about. The conversation needs to be, let's deregulate and allow people to engage and interact, because those interactions improve everybody. That's how you get a rising tide lifts all boats. If Joseph, the Haitian immigrant, if his only option is to stay in Haiti, he's not going to do well. His children, they will not do well. He will be limited by whatever is available to him. His children, who might otherwise have 110 IQ, might end up only being able to scrape by with a 67 IQ because they do not have the opportunities for education, learning to read, experiencing, what is out there in the world that they can use to build upon with their knowledge and be productive members of their society wherever they are. That's what happens when we have all these regulations. We limit people. And then we turn around and we say, well, we've got to help people. You have to help people because you've limited them. That's why. So the libertarian answer, we don't care, should be that we don't really care so much about their IQ. It doesn't matter. There are opportunities, unless you're a libertarian that's willing to say there are no IQ, there are no options for people with low IQ in this country, in which case I would challenge you and you will lose. So the reality is IQ doesn't matter, right? It might tell us a little something, but it doesn't tell us the full story. It does tell us that Joseph, who is 48, if he registers as an IQ of 67, he's not likely to, I mean, he might get a few points higher over the years being here in America, but it's not going to go up tremendously. But his children, well, their IQ might go up because, well, I don't want to say it might go up, but it might be recorded as higher because they will have availability to, they will have access to education and the things that they need to be able to do well on an IQ test. I don't have it queued up, but I'll tell you a quick story. This also comes from Thomas Sowell. He points out that I believe it was Jews that came from Russia after World War I. They initially were they were deemed as having low IQ, and this was by the guy who created the Scholastic aptitude test, I believe, the creator of it. And he tested them and he was like, okay, this myth that Jews are like super smart is debunked. Like that's basically what he said, right? He was like, they have low IQs. But then a generation or two later, when when they became more literate in English, they started doing better and better and better. And now we're at the point where nobody would argue that Jewish people have low IQs. In fact, they do very, very well and are disproportionate in many areas that require heavy cognitive demands, economics, finance, so on and so forth. These are not necessarily easy things to do, depending on the level at which you're getting into it, right? But they've been excelling in disproportionate numbers. Why is that? That's because they have access to the world around them, and then they were able to exploit it for their benefit, which is basically what an opportunity is. An opportunity is something that you can exploit to your benefit. And I think that the answer should be we open up as many opportunities as we possibly can through deregulation, and we allow people to flourish, because that is what the history of the human race has shown us, that people flourish when they are not impeded by all kind of barriers like regulation. That's our answer. That is, in my opinion, the proper libertarian answer. Let me know what you think in the comments. All right, one last one last comment. Good Ute says America is slowly becoming a crap hole country. In a way, yes. And I would argue the reason it is becoming that way is because two reasons. Number one, we tolerate poor behavior. We tolerate it in our schools. I mean, half of it, I don't want to say half, but for exaggeration purposes, half of America was burning down during BLM riots. Now, there was a legitimate complaint there, like, hey, policing is not good. Many libertarians would agree with that 100%, but then it turned into people rioting and burning down things. We should never have tolerated that. We should also never tolerate regulations that impede people. The only regulation that I think, the primary regulation that I think we should focus on is making sure that when two people are coming together to make an exchange of some sort, that the only requirement is that there's no fraud. That if one person knows some information that's relevant to the other person that would cause them to change their mind in some way about that transaction, they are obligated to let them know. Transparency. So if I want to sell you a car and I know that the fuel in I'm gonna get myself in trouble because I don't remember. Let's say that I know that there's a component on the car that sporadically doesn't work, right? Whatever that component is, and it can cause significant problems while you're driving. Okay, let's say I know that, but it's not consistent. It just sporadically doesn't work. I know that. I have an obligation to let you know, because that's going to change maybe your negotiation. Maybe you'll offer me less money, or maybe you'll choose that, this is not the vehicle that I want. I'm not interested in trying to repair it. I want a vehicle that's fully functional, right? But if I sell you that vehicle knowing that there's a problem that would have otherwise convinced you, you have a claim of fraud against me. That's what libertarians would focus on heavily. That's what we need instead of regulations. We just simply need to say, you have to be transparent in your interactions with other people. These transactions, you cannot deceive people, because that's effectively the same thing. It's the same thing as assaulting somebody and taking their money. It's effectively the same thing. You've committed a crime. It may not be actual violence, but it's effectively the same thing because you've taken from them against their will. All right, folks, I better wrap this up. Hope you enjoyed the show. I apologize that it was so terribly long, but I hope you found it informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. I know I was a little late this morning, had some technical difficulties, and then we also had a little bit of challenge getting the little guy out to school. So family comes first. But make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel or my Rumble channel if you prefer. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow. But for now,